we're going to discuss about publish, subscribe, model in this lecture. So we got a problem here. I cannot add the product here from my products list to the cart view, as both are having different scope. As we don't have access to sibling scope objects, how we are going to solve this, right? One solution, we thought of making all of this data global so that it's accessible everywhere, but that's not a good practice. So I have my updated HTML from last lecture. You can see I have added a new function called add to cart to add the products to the cart. I have created a new array called cart in my cart controller, which will contain the products added from the products view, and one function for removing items from the cart. Moving on to the presentation, you can see I have added ngClick directive to add to cart button, and it's calling add to cart function written on my product controller. I have created one more table to display all of the products added to the cart, and one more ngClick which will remove the item from the cart array using remove from cart function written in my cart controller. Okay, so we got a problem here. When I'm gonna click on add to cart button, it's gonna call this function, and I need to have access to this cart array so that I can add the product to the cart. But unfortunately, I can't access cart controller scope object here inside product controller scope object. So I can't access this cart array as well. But we can communicate to the scope object using this scope when this function will get called. Yes, I'm talking about scope to scope communication, and AngularJS has some nice functions defined on scope object we can use to do the communication. Let's first understand these functions, and then we will apply this knowledge to solve our problem. So I have my scope hierarchy diagram, and say suppose something happens here on this parent scope and you want child scopes to know about it. We can use $broadcast function to send an event from current scope to all the child scopes. It accepts two arguments. First is the name of the event, and second is the data you want to pass along with that event. And when you want to pass messages from child scope to all the parent scope up to the root scope, we can use $emit function. The arguments are same. First will be the name of the event, and second will be data we want to pass. Now $broadcast and $emit sends an event, so we need some way to listen for these events, right? And for that we can use $on function, which accepts two arguments. First one is the name of the event, and second one is the handler function. Cool, simple to understand, right? Now let's use these functions, as these functions are written on scope object. So I'm gonna use $root scope to handle all of this messaging. Why? Because I can inject $root scope in any controller, and $root scope is parent of all the child scope object. So I can use it as a centralized events broadcasting object. Whatever happens on any part of the application, my $root scope object will broadcast an event so that all of the interested child scope object can listen for it. So I'm going to inject $root scope object in product controller, use it to broadcast an event called add product, and I'm going to pass the product object. Then I'm going to listen for this add product event here on my child scope object inside cart controller and call the function say add. Let's implement this add function. This handler function is going to get two arguments. First one is the event object, and second one is the data we passed while sending this event. So let's finally add the product to the cart array using the data. Run the application. We don't have anything in the cart. Let's click on add to cart button, and there we go. The product is added to the cart view. Let's add one more. Cool, it's working fine. Now let's look at this. It's so loosely coupled. I mean how I'm interacting with different parts of the application using events. I'm not accessing this scope object here and calling a function on it. There is no hard dependency exist between these objects. They're just communicating with each other using events. Right? Now we have used $broadcast function which sends messages from parent scope to the child scope. This time I'm going to use $emit to send messages from current scope to all the parent scope. We should use $root scope here as well, but I just want to show you the example of this. So when I will remove any of the item from the cart, I'm going to send a message to all the parent scope using $emit function. And I'll listen for this event here on my top controller, app controller using $on function. Then name of the event and handle function. For simplicity, let's just log something here. Refresh, first add some product, open the console, click on remove from cart button, and there we go. So in summary, you have multiple controllers. Now you need to communicate between them. Use $broadcast to send event from current scope to all the child scope. And use $emit to send messages from current scope to all the parent scope. And finally, use $on function to listen for these messages. Keep in mind, it's a good practice to use $root scope for all event dispatching code.